The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today on the Solar Podcast, synergies between energy conservation and renewable energy. My guest today is Lloyd Kass. He is Vice President of Market Development and Regulatory Strategy for Franklin Energy and AM Conservation Group. Welcome to the show, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Excited to dig into your work at Franklin Energy and learn more about how the United States energy conservation market is evolving. And before we get into that, give our listeners some background on yourself, Lloyd.
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all. And I have a varied background in both the public sector and the private sector as it relates to buildings and energy management. And I've been developing and running various programs, often for utility companies, to deliver energy efficiency, demand reduction, to the grid. To all kinds of residents and residential and business customers.
Very good. And how is it that you came to Franklin Energy? What is your, what is your mission there at Franklin?
Sure. As I joined just about 3.5 months ago, Franklin is a company that's been around since 1994. And has grown from being centered around the Midwest to having a really, really robust business in the Midwest. But we work coast to coast, from New England down into the Carolinas and Georgia, all the way out to California, Texas, and so forth. And the company's been growing and is looking for a new, to kind of reset their trajectory and for another round of growth. And a new leadership team has been coming on board, and I joined shortly after Jim Matty, our new CEO, joined, and my boss, the Chief Commercial Officer, Marissa Uchin, joined. And my goal and my job is to develop all of our new growth strategies in the context of a very complex and changing policy and regulatory environment, and just getting the company positioned in a market that is a moving target.
I'd like to circle back a little bit to your personal background. We energy professionals are a very diverse bunch. I got into energy through the lens of sustainability and ecology, but what is it that motivated you to focus on energy efficiency and climate change mitigation?
Sure. It was interesting. I, entered government kind of as a generalist, trying to be in the business of solving, or not solving, I would say making problems less bad, complex problems less bad, and at scale. And that's really what I built kind of the beginning of my career on, and got very much involved in public housing and rehabilitation of public housing, which is very challenging because those buildings are generally very, highly occupied, and you have to work around occupants. And we did a lot of those upgrades when I was at the New York City Public Housing Authority, by virtue of, investing in these buildings, knowing that energy savings would come out of them. And so I kind of transitioned from trying to solve big problems to trying to solve big problems in a vast portfolio of buildings to energy efficiency, which needs to happen at scale in all sorts of buildings and the built environment.
And so you mentioned this the dynamic nature of the policy landscape, and that's a challenge for all of us, because markets ebb and flow, right? There's funding in Illinois, and then all of a sudden there's not funding in Illinois, and you have to go to Michigan or Pennsylvania. But what is it at its core that Franklin is doing then with utilities? I assume it has something to do with helping them move forward in a more timely manner than they might be able to do on their own, but you tell me.
Well, I kind of, in order to understand utilities, we have to understand that most customers are customers of large investor-owned utilities that are publicly traded and regulated by state public utility commissions. And they are carrying out the mandates of the state. And many states have what they call an energy efficiency resource standard, which requires all the utilities in that jurisdiction to go out and get energy efficiency savings, partially because it's cheap and you don't want to overbuild the grid, and they've got these mandates and there's cost recovery mechanisms in place. So in the best case scenarios, these utilities are making as much money doing energy efficiency as they are doing their core business. And so we come to those utilities. They have these goals, they have these targets. Sometimes the utilities on their, more and more on their own accord are committed to decarbonizing, and energy efficiency is a major component of that. And we help them develop programs that serve all the different types of customers that they serve, to that essentially where we white label our services and knock on all kinds of people's doors, commercial buildings, residential buildings, folks up and down the economic spectrum who have different varying needs, and do everything from insulation to HVAC upgrades to lighting. And with each one of those projects, there is savings associated with that. And then we aggregate those savings and we essentially sell those savings to the utility, as you would sell any other energy resource.
And so is Franklin actually delivering services to the end user?
We do. We play different roles in that that chain, so to speak, where we'll develop the program, and sometimes the program that we develop, we also set up and administer. And sometimes when we're setting up those programs and we're administering them, we're also doing what you might call we do call in our industry, direct install, meaning that the company that is responsible for acquiring the savings is actually sending folks, out into the street, not to knock on doors. Obviously, we're doing all kinds of outreach to get to customers, but knocking on doors is the most colorful way, I guess, to say it. And actually bringing those projects through the pipeline and accruing the savings. But in other programs that we operate, we are setting up incentives among customers and contractors that do this work, and sending out, in our own way, market signals to make it, appealing to these customers and these contractors to take part in these projects.
Okay. And let's give our listeners an example. What is a state that you can reference some important policy action in, and then walk us through how Franklin has made a difference in that state?
Sure. So why don't we use Illinois? Illinois has, over the last really decade, from a legislative standpoint, through the Future Energy Jobs Act that was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor, really ramped up energy efficiency goals for the utility industry, essentially setting those goals among the highest in the country, incentivizing utilities to go out and get that savings, and the and then the so there's these goals, and they have to, and the utilities get budgets in which to invest in these programs, and over a period of a few years need to come back and true up with their regulator, that showing that they acquired these savings and serve these customers with these products and services. And this, ComEd, and Ameren, the two large electric utilities, Nicor Gas, Peoples Gas, the gas utilities in the state. We work for each one of them on both the residential and the commercial side, and we have a number of different program designs we bring to the market in the forms of products and services to either change the behavior or upgrade a facility. And we acquire and aggregate those savings, associated with these projects, report on it to the utility. The utility reports it onto the regulator, and everybody's in compliance, and the state's achieved its policy goals.
So we're talking about reducing kWh consumption at the end of the day, right?
Right.
And you can do that by installing more energy efficient equipment like LED lighting, upgrading HVAC systems, installing more modern, control systems and electronics. And how does that business work, though? Is it that the utilities then are issuing RFPs to an ecosystem of contractors like Franklin?
They are. More or less in most states, it's about every 3 years. They can level set and see how the program is delivering, what it set out to deliver within budget, and with high customer satisfaction. And then, there are RFPs, and it's a very competitive landscape, and that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. And do you have a sense of what those goals are in terms of energy conservation?
Sure.
In Illinois?
I think I have to go back and check because the numbers do change, but let's just say Illinois is on the high end of the spectrum in terms of aggressive energy efficiency goals. You have states like Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, California, and others that are striving to invest in energy efficiency at a level that represents about 2% of the sales, electric sales of that utility, and also representing a corresponding amount of savings to the energy system. Obviously, savings happens at different times of day and with different customer types, and has different values according to the load profile of those customers. But generally speaking, it can be in the order of 2% of the annual sales of a utility like ComEd. I should also mention that while the numbers are generally in the same order of magnitude, they tend to be a little bit lower. And gas utilities in many states, including Illinois, are subject to the same requirements. So, a furnace upgrade or a hot water heater upgrade for a hot water heater that runs on gas, the customers get incentivized to put the most efficient equipment in, and they would get those incentives through a program like one that Franklin runs.
And in the greater scheme of things, when you think about, the built environment and the energy that's flowing into that environment, one of the things that's going on, of course, globally is the transition to electrification. So we're moving away from natural gas powered equipment, and some cities have now banned the future use of natural gas out in California. Speak to that. Is where are we in this, and do the gas utilities, do they feel more pressure, so to speak, than the pure electric utilities?
I think being in the utility industry and the energy efficiency component, aspects of it, is everybody's feeling the pressure. I don't want to speak to my friends at the gas utilities in terms of what they're specifically facing, because they run complicated businesses that I know only an aspect of. But with that said, there is a big movement, we've seen in the energy efficiency industry for decades, where you see big movement on the coasts, particularly in the Northeast and in California, where there is aggressive goals towards electrification, and we, and California and, let's say, the Northeast, and a state like Illinois or throughout the upper Midwest, they have different challenges because they have cold winters, right? So there is, we're at the very, very beginning of a transition, but at the same time, all energy efficiency, whether you're putting in a heat pump to just upgrade your air conditioning system, or you're putting it in a heat pump for heating and cooling, or you're retrofitting your gas-fired heating system, all of that is energy, is carbon reduction, and all of that matters. So, I would say that, number one. And number two, there is a lot of market development that is just beginning to take place, where contractors who have been putting in more conventional AC units, air conditioning units, and more conventional heating equipment for many years, are just at the beginning of getting educated on heat pumps and getting comfortable, replacing the more conventional equipment for these heat pumps and building trust around them. And there's a lot of investment in training and market development around that. And that's going to be, it's a challenging road. It's important. There's a lot of benefits to it. Most namely, as we all who study the grid know, that the grid is built for the hottest day of the year in most jurisdictions, at least as it exists today. And if you're putting more load on it through vehicle, transportation electrification, or building electrification, you're getting a lot more efficiency out of that system, right? But that also with it requires, with that much more load on the system, will require a lot more management of the flow of electrons over the course of a day or a season or a year.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Future Energy Jobs Act here in Illinois. That has been a game-changing piece of legislation for us. We now have part 2 in the works, called the Governor's Omnibus Bill, which is, going to vastly increase those goals pretty much across the board, right? We're getting 100% renewable portfolio standard, and then much more funding for renewable energy and energy conservation. But what other legislation and policies around the country are you interested in and following, or perhaps influencing? And maybe you could speak to your role in working with different states.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good example of a state is my home state of New Jersey. When Governor Murphy was elected in 2017, he got to work on a pretty ambitious energy efficiency and clean energy strategy. The legislature had been working on it, but not being able to get agreement with the prior governor. And so there was a lot of legislation ready to go. And in the spring of 2018, being spearheaded less by by the industry and more by, folks committed to clean energy among elected officials, as well as environmental advocates, got the Clean Energy Act of 2018 issued. And within that, it very much like the Future Energy Jobs Act set very specific targets and pulled the utilities into this into the energy efficiency business in a way they hadn't been in over a decade. There were statewide government-run energy efficiency programs that made a dent in energy efficiency in the state, but the utilities were now going to be in the lead position as of 2018, and it really led to a tripling of the amount of energy efficiency the state was investing in overall. And there's a lot of details to work out to make those programs and the cost recovery that the utilities face for those programs, and who you serve and with how much resources, all of that. There was close to a 2-year stakeholder engagement process led by the Board of Public Utilities, which is the utility regulator in the state. And I was involved in the forming of what's now called the Energy Efficiency Alliance of New Jersey, which was a collection of companies. And you see this a lot in our industry where Franklin and other companies band together, even though they're competitors, to ensure that the programs and the incentives and the administrative infrastructure that's set up will work for everyone. The regulators are looking out for their citizens, but the utilities, have a big job to do providing reliable power, and they also need, when they invest in energy efficiency, they're actually selling less energy. So there has to be some cost recovery accommodations made. So they're really incentivized to double down on this. And so we work very closely with the regulator and the utility industry at the Energy Efficiency Alliance, which included Franklin Energy, and really got a very robust set of nation leading programs that are now off the ground and ramping up. And it's a whole new day in the state of New Jersey.
Very cool. I always wonder with these programs that are typically administered by utilities, is that a conflict of interest when you're saying, hey, Mr. Utility, we'd like you to sell less electricity to the state of Illinois or the state of New Jersey, even though that's your business model. How do they handle that potential conflict?
Well, yeah, that was more of a conflict, I'd say, up until the mid 1990s. And that's when it varies by state, but that's when the energy efficiency industry, the energy and utility industry, I should say, became more deregulated in the sense that the the electric utilities in many states are not necessarily compensated. Customers pay by the amount of about the amount of energy they consume, but the utilities themselves, when they go to the regulator and for a rate increase, are really being paid on how effectively they're delivering those electrons, and how well through well-maintained wires and pipes and substation infrastructure and the like. And they're really being paid to make the CapEx investment in the distribution grid, and in some cases the transmission grid. So they've been sort of out of the business of volume sales for a while. It does vary by state. But with that said, there still needed to be cost recovery and business model modifications to make it really in the interest of utilities to do this. And one of the ways in which this happens in many states with these energy efficiency resource standards, as they're called more universally, is that there are actually bonus incentives that utilities are paid for reaching these goals that make up for the losses that they may have acquired ordinarily. And they can recover the costs of the program investments themselves on top of that. And in some states, there are penalties. So if they miss the goals in the state like Pennsylvania, the utilities, there is actually a hit on the utilities balance sheet for missing those goals. So there's a lot of carrots and sticks in place to make energy efficiency more part of a utilities core business.
When you say, when you refer to deregulation, you mean like how Illinois is a deregulated state where the utility ComEd is not the one that controls all the KWH sales. There's 70 suppliers of KWH. They
Correct.
are one also, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it varies by state, but yes, there are many states where consumers have the option to go elsewhere to purchase their commodity, especially these days, a consumer or a collection of consumers. They have something called community choice aggregation, where a municipality may go to the market collectively and bid their annual consumption or into the market and sign a contract for the energy they consume with a third-party supplier. And then that energy supplier, that commodity, flows through the grid that ComEd, in this case, operates. And then everybody's utility bill is part commodity, part distribution and transportation. And so what you're doing is you're separating those out and paying two entities for those two components.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned community choice aggregation. That has served us very well here in Illinois. My city of Urbana participates in such a program, and they were able to negotiate an all renewable energy supply at 4.5 cents to consumers. It's an amazingly low rate, and it's clean green energy. The only problem I have with it is it creates a barrier to entry for renewables. It's hard to make solar pencil when you're offsetting 4.5 cent kWh grid power that's already clean, but it's a good problem to have.
Yes.
So, are there other success stories, Lloyd, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the things that we talk about energy efficiency, you're talking about, in the most simple terms, a homeowner uses a certain number of kilowatt hours a week, a month, a year. You do energy efficiency upgrades, and that you may lower that consumption by 20, 25, 30% in some instances. And that's great. And the project pays for itself and so forth. Franklin's also, and it's a big part of the demand side part of the energy industry. We're involved in something that's historically been called demand response. And it's an evolving part of the demand side management industry, but it's specifically around being able to use now these smart thermostats many of us have in our homes that have two-way communication, a Nest thermostat, an Ecobee thermostat. There are many others that have this two-way communication. So as many of, in many jurisdictions, and, we have a situation where you can, run the energy system with clean energy for certain parts of the day. And then at peak times, and that could be, let's say 5:00 PM. I'll just, they tend to be windows, but I'm just going to pick a time and think about it. There are, that's when, at least before COVID, and COVID changing this a bit, but businesses and office buildings are still on the hottest day of the year, running their lighting and their cooling and whatever else. But people are starting to come home and turn and crank up their cooling, and maybe plugging in an electric vehicle and running a dishwasher and running other appliances. And it's sort of a perfect storm of demand. And at that time, the system has to reach deep into what are called peaker plants. And those peaker plants run a few times a year in many instances, and they're often the least efficient, dirtiest forms of energy production. And through these smart thermostats that can be put in homes and other smart equipment in businesses, you can incentivize customers to shed load at those times. You may pre-cool your home before the peak, and then coast through the peak period, and then those peak resources don't need to be turned on, and the homeowner or property owner gets paid to enroll in that, and you get greater efficiency across the system. And that's where demand and supply kind of come together, it's corny, but in harmony, to optimize the system and avoid those peaker plants from being needed at all.
So we've talked about a few of the states that are really on the short list of thought leadership around the country. New Jersey, you mentioned New York, Massachusetts, Illinois now. California is also on this list. Are there other kind of emerging markets that you're excited about?
Absolutely. Let me rattle off three, and they're not emerging markets. They've been doing yeoman's work in energy efficiency, and I'm, to keep it brief, I'm naming sort of the greatest hits that many others name. Minnesota, for example, has had a robust energy efficiency commitment for quite a while now, and Wisconsin's another one. Colorado is another one, and Nevada. And I mentioned Nevada, Colorado, and Minnesota in this particular case because each one of them have now come out of their respective legislative sessions with new legislation mandating greater investment in energy efficiency. Minnesota is, essentially doubling their energy efficiency targets over the next several years. As of the ECO Act that was signed by the governor last month, Governor Jared Polis worked with the legislature to introduce a number of energy efficiency bills that are leading to greater investment in energy efficiency, in gas efficiency. They had a electric utility mandate for efficiency, but not a gas one. Now they have a gas one. They are a state that's putting in funding and requirements that electric all utilities invest in heat pumps to electrify homes and businesses. And they've also put in legislation that requires buildings over 50,000 square feet to benchmark their buildings on regular intervals and meet building performance standards. And the regulations have to be developed, but they would be fined if building owners would be fined if they didn't get their building up to building performance code in a few years once the regulations are developed. And then in Nevada, just passed legislation that's increasing particularly investment, and you see this a lot around the country, increasing investment in low income and disadvantaged and underserved communities, and investing in energy efficiency in those communities who often their residents of those communities, their utility bills are disproportionate to their overall annual or weekly or monthly paycheck. And so energy efficiency, you can help low-income communities invest in their buildings, improve them, and lower their energy bills, and frankly, make those homes more healthy because you're lowering the emissions of those buildings. And they've also made a big investment in energy efficiency in schools in many of those same communities, which is also a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Do you have a sense, Lloyd, in the greater scheme of things, when we're talking about a net zero grid, what the role of energy efficiency plays in that? Sure.
Yeah, it's, I don't want to get in, there's a lot of folks who, I should have said at the beginning of this, I'm a management professional. I am definitely a follower of policy, and I study policy, but it really comes down to numbers, right? And, different states have different goals. The legislation, the energy legislation introduced in Congress just last week is shooting for 80% clean energy by 2030 across the country, and where the federal government would incentivize utilities for committing to that as well. And energy efficiency is a huge part of that, because you've got, think of, if you want to have a cleaner grid, one way to do that is to lower the denominator, as they say, lower the amount of consumption with the existing equipment and systems that are, homes and businesses are using. In part because, then you have, energy efficiency is 100% carbon free when you reduce load. But on the other hand, it'll help the grid get ready for as more load comes on, because buildings are being electrified, transportation is being electrified, population is growing, we're plugging in more devices every day, kind of getting that head start to lower that denominator on the energy use equation, which will give us more time for more clean energy generation to get built and reach these audacious, ambitious goals that policymakers at the federal and state level have right now.
Yeah, it's really a new day. that our federal government is setting such ambitious goals. I mean, it's not the law of the land yet, so there's work to be done. But if you don't have a goal, right, it's very difficult to achieve that. And so me and my colleagues in the renewable energy industry are very excited about that goal of 80% by 2030. But I want to give our listeners a clearer picture, if we can, of why energy efficiency is such an important piece of this puzzle. It's a both and, right? We need to reduce kWh consumption with megawatts. That is the low hanging fruit. If you can upgrade your lighting, and if you have not upgraded your lighting to LED, that's one of the big no brainers now. And 5 years ago that wasn't true. There was a tipping point in the cost of LEDs. Or 7 years ago, I don't know when it happened, but now it is cost effective to upgrade your lighting out of pocket, and then of course there's incentive programs that sweeten the deal, so to speak, and shorten the ROI. In Illinois, we often liken lighting upgrades to a three year or less ROI. But why is energy efficiency so important to the energy transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for a number of reasons. As we move into an era where we have all these products, whether it's LED lighting or anything else, we're calling smart building products, and you're going to have smart appliances at home, and be able to set all of your equipment just the way you set your thermostat and we're all part of a kind of moving towards it being part of a virtual power plant, so to speak. You may have solar on your roof, electric vehicles on your driveway that you're charging, and in putting these smart products in your building, in your home. And we increasingly will be aware, and folks, it's not that far off that batteries will be part of a residential solar package and a cost-effective investment to put additional battery charging in your home. So the interactivity between the energy efficient equipment in your home, which could also be smart equipment, allows you to buy energy when it's cleanest and when it's cheapest, and shift your loads around, and just prevent a much cleaner grid that's much more reliable. And if you've got this smart equipment with a battery, for example, if in the West, where you may have to go off the grid or the grid may have to, parts of the grid may have to come down because enough climate change has happened where we are having fires, and that's not going to get undone. And California, they're shutting down parts of the grid to avoid fires. When there are some very, very forward-thinking homeowners who have very energy efficient homes with solar and with batteries and with electric vehicles, and they've been able to keep on keeping on, even when their utility company shuts down power for however long that's happening. And we're seeing this in parts of California right now. So energy efficiency is just a huge part of that puzzle to have digital, smart, clean homes and an energy system, and an affordable one at that.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that. Installing equipment that is not just sitting there talking to itself, but talking to the grid, so that the grid operator can go, okay, Mr. Homeowner or Mr. Business Owner, we want to pre-cool your home or pre-cool your building. We want to prevent you from, turning on your HVAC at a high throttle at a certain hour of the day. And so it's through these upgrades that we're going to get that bidirectionality or multi-directionality of the infrastructure in our built environment, and give society much broader capabilities. And as you mentioned, then there's also this whole virtual power plant phenomenon, where especially if you have batteries in your home or building, those can become one big battery. We saw in the news just last week that Tesla is now doing this with the Powerwall, and Sonnen has a program, I think, in PJM. So it's very early days for some of these technologies, but they have a lot of potential. Well, in our last few minutes, Lloyd, what else should our listeners know about Franklin Energy and all the good that you're doing in the world?
Well, one thing I would say is, a lot of your listeners, I would imagine, are in the clean energy industry writ large, and I would argue that, for example, let's just use the residential solar industry and Franklin, we're in part in the residential energy efficiency industry. Let's work together and, kind of optimize our services for the sake of our customers. If we, I think customers have a real difficulty, particularly homeowners. They've got jobs to do, families to raise, lives to live. And, a company like Franklin knocks on your door to talk about insulation and and upgrading your HVAC system. And then another company knocks on your door and talks to you about solar. And I think we need to do a better job of creating more, because these systems are going to work together anyway, but also we'll be more successful together if we partner up and bring our services to the customer as a single project, or different phases of their sort of different rungs, let's say, on the clean energy ladder for a customer.
Very good. Well, I want to make a couple of announcements, and then we'll let our listeners know how they can reach you, Lloyd. I want to encourage our listeners to check out all of our interviews here at cesnrg.com/podcast. We're bringing you tools and technologies like architectural solar and Lumos Solar. They make, bar none, the most beautiful architectural solar panels in the industry. Thought leaders like Mark Pruitt, who was our original director of the IPA, talking about how we're expanding legislation and what are the impacts of that here in the Midwest. We bring you great content about solar grazing with the American Solar Grazing Association, and pollinator solar with Mike Kiernan from Be the Change. Things like solar art with Shala, and impact investing with Mike Silvestrini. So many, many topics. And then we also do a news roundup on a weekly basis with my co-host, John Weaver, the commercial solar guy, called the Clean Power Hour. You can subscribe to all of this right there at cesnrg.com. Please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and please make comments. We love to hear from our listeners. That's the only way I know what matters to you. So please check it out and reach out to us. I want to thank Lloyd Kass for coming on the show today from Franklin Energy. How can our listeners reach you, Lloyd?
The good old fashioned, email. I'm at LKAS as in Sam at franklinenergy.com. And you can always look me up on LinkedIn. I probably spend too much time on that platform, and you can message me. and I'm happy to have a conversation.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Tim Montague, your host. Let's grow solar and storage. Thanks so much.